Her billionaire husband secretly married his mistress. She found out from a photo her mother-in-law posted on Instagram. The next day, she quietly sold their $100 million house and made him scream hysterically when he came back. "Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty lift every woman to a place of honor so high that no disrespect can ever touch her. May he fill her with strength that does not bend, a voice that cannot be silenced, and a heart so radiant it warms every soul around her. A woman carries history in her spirit, love in her hands, and patience in her silence. She is the quiet miracle that keeps life moving forward. So, my beloved family, cherish her deeply. Do not let her tears fall unnoticed. Do not let her kindness be taken for granted. Treat her like the rarest blessing God has placed in your life. When you raise a woman, you raise a world. When you protect her dignity, you honor your own soul. If your heart is true like the video, if your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." Janine Spencer had built empires while other women built Pinterest boards. She owned 7 luxury hotels across 3 continents, and her signature on a contract was worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. She also thought she had a husband. The past tense being the operative disaster. Milan smelled like espresso and ambition, which was exactly why Janine loved conducting business there. The suite at the Grand Hotel overlooked the Duomo, and she'd been negotiating for the past 6 hours with a family who wanted to sell their boutique property in Lake Como. The old man across from her, distinguished and stubborn, had finally agreed to her terms. 200 million transferred, papers signed, another jewel in her collection. Her assistant Rebecca poured champagne, and Janine allowed herself exactly 3 sips before her phone buzzed on the marble table. Instagram notification. Her mother-in-law had posted something. Janine almost ignored it. Constance Moore posted constantly, usually pictures of her garden or her book club or her ridiculous Pomeranian wearing sweaters. But something made Janine pick up the phone. Maybe intuition. Maybe the universe deciding it was time to detonate her life. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, like a horror movie reveal. Charlie in a tuxedo. Not unusual. Her husband wore tuxedos the way other men wore jeans. But he was kissing a woman, a young blonde woman in a white dress, veil trailing behind her, bouquet of white roses clutched in her hand. They were standing on a beach, sunset painting everything gold and pink and absolutely fucking devastating. The caption read, "Welcome to the family, Piper. So blessed to have 2 daughters-in-law now. My heart is so full." Janine stared at the screen. Read the caption again. 2 daughters-in-law, 2. The champagne glass in her other hand didn't shake. Her breathing didn't quicken. She simply set the glass down with perfect precision and looked at Rebecca, who was staring at her with wide, horrified eyes. "Clear the room," Janine said quietly, "and bring me my lawyer's number, also my real estate broker, and my private investigator." In that order, Rebecca scrambled. The Italian family looked confused but left quickly, sensing the shift in atmosphere like animals before an earthquake. Within 3 minutes, Janine was alone in the suite with her phone, the Instagram post, and a clarity so pure it felt like ice water in her veins. She didn't cry. Crying was for later, maybe, or never. Crying was for women who didn't know what to do next. Janine knew exactly what to do next. Her lawyer answered on the first ring. "Janine, how did the Lake Como deal go?" "Perfectly. Listen to me very carefully, Harrison. I'm sending you a screenshot. My husband just married another woman. I want to know everything. Legally, financially, every single detail. I want to know if I'm still married. I want to know if she's legally married. I want to know what my options are, and I want to know all of this within 12 hours. Harrison was silent for exactly 2 seconds. Jesus Christ. "Janine, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be thorough. Call me back when you know something." She hung up and immediately dialed her real estate broker. Desmond Burke had sold her half the properties she owned, and he owed her favors stacked so high they reached the ceiling. "Desmond, I need to sell the Beacon Hill house. Fast." "How fast are we talking?" I need it listed immediately, and I need you to call everyone who's ever expressed interest. I know Lawrence Fontaine has wanted it for years. Tell him I'm willing to negotiate if he moves quickly. Janine, what happened? My husband happened. Can you make this work? I'll start making calls. But you need to understand that rushing this means you won't get full value. We're talking millions less than what it's worth if we take our time. I don't care about the money. I care about him coming home to find that nothing is the same. Then I'll make it happen. Give me a few days. Third call. Her private investigator, a woman named Imani, who could find anything on anyone and had the discretion of a Swiss banker. Imani. My husband, Charlie Moore. I need everything. Where he's been, who he's been with, financial transactions, properties I don't know about, bank accounts, debts, everything. There's a woman named Piper, probably Piper Whitlock if she kept her name, probably didn't. Find out who she is. Find out when they got married. Find out why. And Imani? I need this yesterday. How deep do you want me to dig? All the way to hell, if that's where the truth is. Janine booked a flight back to Boston, leaving in 4 hours. She packed methodically, each item folded with crisp precision, her hands steady as a surgeon's. Rebecca hovered nearby, clearly wanting to say something comforting, clearly not knowing what words existed for this situation. Should I cancel your meetings for the rest of the week? Rebecca finally asked. Cancel nothing. Reschedule everything for video calls. My life doesn't stop because my husband is an idiot. On the drive to the airport, Harrison called back. His voice was tight, professional, angry on her behalf. It's legal. He married her 3 weeks ago in the Maldives. You were in Singapore at that conference. The marriage is registered, legitimate, which means he's committed bigamy. That's a felony, Janine. We can have him arrested. I don't want him arrested. What do you want? Janine watched Milan blur past the car window, the city she loved. The city where she'd just closed another brilliant deal. The city that would now forever be connected to the moment her marriage exploded. I want him to suffer, not in prison. That's too easy, too fast, too private. I want him to lose everything slowly enough that he feels every single piece crumble. Can you make that happen? I can make a lot of things happen. Give me 48 hours. You have 24. The flight was 11 hours of contained fury. Janine didn't sleep. She opened her laptop and started making lists. Assets in her name, assets in his name, joint accounts, properties, investments. She calculated, cross-referenced, strategized. The couple next to her asked if she was okay, probably because she'd been staring at spreadsheets with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. I'm wonderful, Janine said with a smile that could cut glass. Just planning my future. Halfway through the flight, Imani sent a file. Janine opened it and felt something cold and sharp lodge itself in her chest. Charlie hadn't just married Piper. He'd been spending Janine's money like it was confetti at a parade. Luxury cars she'd never seen. An apartment in Manhattan she didn't know existed. Gambling debts in Las Vegas totaling millions. And Piper Whitlock wasn't just some random woman. Her father owned casinos. This wasn't a love story. This was a business transaction wrapped in a white dress and lies. Janine transferred $18 million from their joint accounts into her personal holdings. She sold 2 investment properties they owned together, taking her half immediately. She changed passwords on everything she could access. She did all of this from seat 14A on a transatlantic flight, drinking sparkling water and declining the pasta. When the plane landed in Boston, dawn was breaking over the city. Janine turned on her phone and watched messages flood in. 17 calls from Charlie, 12 texts, 6 voicemails. She didn't listen to any of them. Instead, she opened her messages, found his name, and typed one word, congratulations. Then she added him to her blocked contacts and walked off the plane into the terminal, her heels clicking against the floor with the sound of a woman who had just declared war. By the time she reached baggage claim, Desmond had texted that he'd reached out to potential buyers and should have updates within the next few days. Janine smiled for the first time since seeing that Instagram post. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just realized that being underestimated was the greatest gift her husband had ever given her. He thought she'd cry, beg, fall apart. He thought she'd be devastated and helpless. He thought wrong. By the time Charlie realized what was happening, Janine would already be 3 moves ahead, dismantling the life he'd built on her foundation, piece by careful piece. She had transferred millions, contacted her broker about the house, and sent her husband one devastating word. She had also decided that destroying Charlie Moore wasn't going to be a moment of rage. It was going to be a masterpiece, and she had all the time in the world to paint it perfectly. Chapter 2. The $100 Million Goodbye. Janine's driver picked her up from the airport in silence. Thomas had worked for her long enough to know when to talk and when to simply drive. He pulled up to the Beacon Hill mansion just as the sun fully crested the horizon, painting the brick facade in shades of amber and gold. The house looked exactly as it always had, grand, imposing, a monument to wealth and taste. Soon it would belong to someone else. She walked through the front door with her keys for what she knew might be one of the last times. The house smelled like the expensive candles Charlie's decorator had scattered everywhere, like leather and wood polish and money. Janine stood in the foyer, looking at the sweeping staircase, the chandelier that cost more than some people's houses, the art collection that lined the walls. She felt nothing. Not nostalgia, not sadness, just a clean, pure sense of purpose. Her phone rang. Desmond. I've got Lawrence Fontaine interested, but he wants to see the property first. Also, a few other buyers have reached out. If you're serious about moving fast, we can probably close within a week, maybe 10 days. But Janine, you need to prepare yourself. We're looking at probably 85 million, maybe 90 if we're lucky. That's a significant loss from market value. How soon can Lawrence see it? This afternoon if you're available. Make it happen. She called the one person she trusted implicitly with logistics. Her best friend Simone, who ran an art gallery in the city and had opinions about everything and the spine to voice them all. I need movers. The expensive kind who work fast and don't ask questions. I need them to go to the house in Nantucket and the apartment in Manhattan. Everything that's mine comes out. Everything that's his stays exactly where it is. Simone didn't waste time with questions about what happened. She'd probably already seen the Instagram post. Everyone had probably seen it by now. I'll have crews there tomorrow morning. Where are you going to be? I'm taking a suite at the hotel on Newbury. The one we stayed at when we first met, remember? The one where we drank too much wine and you told me you were going to marry that idiot? That's the one. Poetic, isn't it? Poetic is one word for it. Satisfying is better. Janine walked through the house one more time, not sentimentally but strategically. She wanted to remember exactly what she was leaving behind so Charlie would know precisely what he'd lost. The kitchen where she'd hosted dinner parties that advanced her connections. The library where she'd read contracts late into the night while he slept upstairs. The bedroom where she'd slept alone, more nights than not, because Charlie was always traveling, always busy, always somewhere else. Probably with Piper, she realized now. Probably in that Manhattan apartment. Spending her money on another woman. The rage that washed over her was so pure it almost felt like peace. Lawrence Fontaine arrived that afternoon with his wife and an architect. They walked through every room, discussing possibilities, already making plans about what furniture to keep and what to replace. Janine watched them fall in love with the house in real time. Mrs. Spencer, Lawrence said after the tour, I can offer you 87 million cash. We can close within a week if you're willing to work with our timeline. Desmond jumped in. Judge Fontaine, the property is worth at least 100 million. If Mrs. Spencer is willing to wait, I'm not willing to wait, Janine interrupted. 87 million, 1 week. But I need you to be flexible on something else. I need to be able to change the locks today, and I need possession to transfer immediately upon closing. No delayed move-in. Lawrence looked surprised but intrigued. You want us to take possession the same day as closing? I want you to take possession the same day as closing. Everything in the house comes with it. Furniture, art, wine collection, everything. Consider it part of the deal. That's extraordinarily generous. It's practical. I don't want any of it. They shook hands. Desmond pulled her aside as the Fontaine left. You just gave away millions in furnishings and art, and you took 13 million less than market value. Janine, are you sure about this? I'm completely sure. I want this house sold and closed before Charlie can do anything about it. Speed is worth the cost. You're terrifying, you know that? Desmond said with something like admiration. I'm just getting started. Over the next few days, the machine Janine had set in motion operated with brutal efficiency. Movers cleared out her personal items from the Nantucket house and the Manhattan apartment. Harrison filed preliminary separation papers and froze what was left of their joint accounts. Imani delivered reports about Charlie's gambling debts, his secret spending, his pattern of lies that stretched back years. Charlie tried everything to reach her. He called from different numbers. He showed up at her office, only to be turned away by security. He sent emails that ranged from apologetic to angry to desperate. She read none of them. She blocked every new number, deleted every email, and continued executing her plan with surgical precision. The day before the house closing, Charlie finally cornered her. He'd somehow figured out she was staying at the Newbury Hotel and waited in the lobby until she returned from dinner with Simone. Janine, please, just talk to me for 5 minutes. She stopped and looked at him. Really looked at him. He appeared disheveled in a way Charlie never allowed himself to be. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes red from what was probably drinking or crying or both. You have 3 minutes, she said coldly. Say what you need to say. I made a terrible mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. You married someone else while married to me. That's not a mistake. That's a felony. That's a calculated series of choices you made over months, probably years. There's nothing to work through. I was drowning in debt. Piper's father, he threatened me. The marriage was a solution to a problem. It didn't mean anything. It meant you're a bigamist. It meant you stole millions from me to pay gambling debts. It meant you lied to my face every single day while building an entire second life. She stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to something deadly quiet. You want to know the worst part? I could have helped you with the debts. If you'd told me the truth, if you'd asked, I would have found a way. But you didn't trust me enough to be honest. You just decided to steal and lie and destroy everything we built. I'm sorry. God, Janine, I'm so sorry. Your apology means nothing. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. She walked past him to the elevator. He tried to follow, but hotel security stepped in, politely but firmly escorting him out. Janine rode up to her suite alone, her hands shaking for the first time since Milan. She poured herself a glass of wine, stood by the window looking out at the city, and let herself feel the weight of everything that had happened. Then she set down the glass, straightened her shoulders, and went back to work. There would be time for emotions later. Right now, there was a closing to finalize. The next day, she sat in Harrison's office signing paperwork while $87 million transferred into her account. Lawrence and his wife signed their documents with obvious excitement. When it was done, Janine handed them the keys. The house is yours. I hope you make beautiful memories there. That evening, Charlie showed up at the Beacon Hill house for what he still thought was his home. He found the locks changed and a cheerful couple unpacking boxes in the living room. Janine knew this because she'd asked Lawrence to text her when it happened. She was having dinner with Desmond when the message came through. He just arrived. Police are here. He's being very dramatic. She showed the text to Desmond, who laughed so hard he nearly choked on his wine. You're magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. He needed to understand that actions have consequences. Now he understands. Her phone rang. Charlie, from yet another new number. This time, she answered. Put him on speaker so Desmond could hear. You sold our house. My house. The one I paid for with my money. I sold it for $87 million that went into my account. You have no legal claim to it. This is insane. You can't just sell everything out from under me. I didn't sell everything. I sold what was mine. You're welcome to keep whatever's actually yours. Which, now that I think about it, isn't very much. I'll fight you on this. I'll take you to court. Please do. I have documentation of every dollar you stole, every lie you told, every law you broke. Take me to court and I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of man you are. She hung up. Blocked the number. Looked at Desmond with something like satisfaction settling in her chest. One house down. The rest of his life to go. Chapter 3. The Unraveling. Morning arrived with headlines. Not national news, but Boston society news, which was somehow worse. The gossip columns had gotten wind of the house sale, the Instagram post, and enough fragments of the truth to construct a scandalous narrative. Janine's phone buzzed with texts from people she hadn't spoken to in months, all of them fishing for information wrapped in false sympathy. She ignored every single message except one. From Simone, "You're famous. Also lunch?" They met at a bistro in the South End, tucked away enough that they wouldn't be interrupted, but public enough that Janine was making a statement. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't ashamed. She was sitting in expensive sunglasses, eating overpriced salad, and looking like a woman who'd just won something instead of lost it. "You're handling this suspiciously well," Simone said, studying her over a glass of rosé. "It's either impressive or concerning." "I spent one night being sad. That's all he gets. One night of me questioning what I did wrong, what I could have done differently, whether I worked too much or paid attention too little. Then I woke up and remembered that none of this is my fault. I didn't marry two people. I didn't lie for years. I didn't steal millions. He did all of that. And now he gets to live with the consequences. What are the consequences exactly? Because from where I'm sitting, you've already hit him pretty hard." Janine set down her fork. "The house was just the opening act. Harrison found something interesting. Charlie's been on the board of 3 major nonprofits. He's listed as a co-founder of our holding company. He's got social capital all over this city. That's about to evaporate." "How?" "Because I've spent the last few days making phone calls. Very polite, very professional phone calls to every board he sits on, informing them that Charlie Moore is currently under investigation for financial irregularities and that I'm removing myself from any organizations where we both serve. I didn't have to say more than that. They're smart people. They can read between the lines." Simone grinned. "You're terrifying. I love it. I'm not done. He's got a board meeting tomorrow for our holding company. He thinks he's going to show up and convince everyone that I'm being unreasonable, that we can work this out professionally. Can you? He's about to find out." The next afternoon, Janine walked into the conference room at Spencer Ventures, the holding company they'd built together from the ground up. The name had always been Spencer, never Moore, because she'd put in the majority of the capital. But Charlie had convinced her to let him be co-founder, to share the leadership, to make it a partnership. She'd agreed because she thought they were partners in everything. She'd been wrong about that too. The board members were already seated. 7 people who managed billions in assets, who made decisions that rippled through industries, who were watching her with expressions that ranged from sympathetic to calculating. Charlie sat at the far end of the table, his jaw tight. His eyes locked on her with something that looked like desperation mixed with fury. "Thank you all for coming," Janine began, her voice steady and clear. "I know there have been rumors circulating about my personal life. I'm not here to discuss those. I'm here to discuss the future of this company and whether it's being led by someone with sound judgment and ethical standards." Charlie stood up. "Janine, this is not the place." "Sit down, Charlie. You'll get your turn to speak." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The command in her tone was absolute. He sat. Janine opened the folder in front of her. For the past several months, I've been reviewing our financial records. What I've found is deeply concerning. There are discrepancies. Money moved without proper authorization. Personal expenses charged to company accounts. Loans taken out using company assets as collateral without full board approval. She slid documents across the table to each board member. This is all documented. Every transaction, every irregularity, every violation of our fiduciary responsibility to our investors. I'm recommending that we remove Charlie Moore from his position as co-founder and terminate his board membership, effective immediately. The room erupted. Charlie was shouting about betrayal, about her using their personal issues to damage him professionally. 2 board members were trying to calm him down. 3 others were reading through the documents with increasingly grim expressions. The board chair, an older woman named Dorothy Kensington, who'd made her fortune in publishing, held up her hand for silence. These are serious allegations, Janine. You're prepared to substantiate all of this? Every single line item. I have documentation going back 5 years. I also have testimony from our accounting team that these expenses were approved by Charlie without proper disclosure. Dorothy turned to Charlie. Is any of this disputable? Charlie's face had gone from red to pale. It's complicated. Some of those were legitimate expenses. Some were personal loans I intended to pay back. Intended to pay back with what money? Janine asked quietly. You have no assets that aren't tied to me or this company. You have debts that exceed your liquidity. You spent money that wasn't yours to spend, and you did it without transparency or accountability. The vote took less than 10 minutes. Charlie Moore was removed from Spencer Ventures. The company was renamed to remove any ambiguity about whose vision had built it. Charlie left the building with security escorting him, still protesting, still trying to spin a narrative where he was the victim. Janine stayed in the conference room after everyone else left, looking out the window at the city below. She felt emptied out, like she'd poured everything into that presentation, and now there was just hollow space where the anger had been. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Flynn, Charlie's brother. Can we talk? She stared at the message. She'd met Flynn exactly 3 times in all the years she'd been married to Charlie. He was younger, quieter, nothing like his brother. He taught at a public school and lived in a modest apartment and had never seemed impressed by wealth or status. She texted back, "Why? Because someone in my family needs to apologize to you, and it should start with me." They met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, far from the social circles where Janine might be recognized and dissected. Flynn was already there when she arrived, looking nervous and sincere in a way that Charlie had never managed. "I don't know what you want me to say," she told him, sitting down without ordering anything. "If this is an intervention on behalf of your brother, it's not. I'm here because I've known for 2 years that Charlie was cheating on you. I didn't know about the marriage, but I knew about Piper. I told him he was being an idiot. I told him he was going to lose the best thing that ever happened to him. He didn't listen. He never listens." Janine absorbed this. 2 years. Everyone had known except her. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because my mother is losing her mind with guilt. Because my brother is calling me 15 times a day, trying to get me to convince you to back off. And because I think you deserve to know that not everyone in the Moore family is a selfish bastard." She almost smiled. "Noted. For what it's worth, I always liked you. I thought you were too good for him. I'm sorry he proved me right." They talked for an hour. Lynn told her about their childhood, about how Charlie had always been the golden child, the one who got away with everything, the one their parents never held accountable. He told her about Constance, who loved her sons but had never taught them consequences. He told her that Charlie was spiraling, drinking too much, making wild accusations to anyone who would listen. "He's going to keep coming after you," Flynn warned. "He's not someone who accepts loss gracefully. Good, let him come." "I'm not afraid of him." Walking back to her car, Janine realized something important. She wasn't afraid of Charlie. She wasn't afraid of the gossip or the legal battles or anything else he might throw at her. She was free from the weight of loving someone who'd never deserved it. And that freedom was worth every difficult thing that came next. Her phone rang. "Desmond, I have someone who wants to meet you. His name is Ezra Thornton. He's an architect from London. He's in town for a project, and he heard you might be interested in consulting on a hotel renovation. I gave him your number. I hope that's okay." "Why wouldn't it be okay?" "Because I also told him you were recently single, and he seemed very interested in that information." Janine laughed, the first real laugh in days. "Desmond, I'm not looking for a relationship." "I didn't say you were. I just said he's interested. What you do with that information is up to you." That night, Ezra Thornton sent her an email. It was professional, polite, and included a portfolio of his work. Buildings that looked like sculptures. Hotels that blended into their landscapes instead of dominating them. Structures that made her think about possibility instead of perfection. At the bottom of the email was a single line. "I'm in Boston until the end of the month." "Coffee?" She stared at that question mark. Thought about saying no. Thought about how she'd just escaped one disaster and didn't need to walk into another. But she also thought about how life was short and uncertain, and how she'd wasted years on someone who didn't appreciate her, and how maybe it was time to see what else was out there. She typed back, "Coffee, but I'm buying." Chapter 4. The Professional Massacre. Charlie made the mistake of thinking that losing his position at Spencer Ventures was the worst thing that could happen to him. He was wrong. It was only the beginning of the professional annihilation Janine had carefully orchestrated. She woke up each morning with a list of tasks, each one designed to dismantle the empire he'd built on her reputation, her money, and her goodwill. First to go was his membership at the Harbor Club, the exclusive social establishment where Boston's elite gathered to network and close deals. The board received an anonymous tip about Charlie's gambling debts, his bigamy charges, and his removal from Spencer Ventures. The vote to revoke his membership was unanimous. He found out when he showed up for lunch with potential investors and was politely but firmly turned away at the door. Janine knew about this because she was having lunch inside with Desmond when it happened. She watched through the window as Charlie argued with the maitre d', his face growing redder, his gestures more frantic. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt nothing at all, which was somehow more satisfying than any emotion could have been. "You're ruthless," Desmond observed, following her gaze. "I mean that as a compliment. I learned from the best. You taught me that reputation is currency in this city. I'm just making sure Charlie's currency is worthless." Desmond leaned back in his chair, studying her with something like pride. "You know what's remarkable? You're not enjoying this. Most people in your position would be gloating, celebrating every fall. But you're just methodical, clinical. It's actually more terrifying than if you were angry." "I was angry for about a week. Then I realized anger was giving him too much power over my emotions. Now I'm just practical. He made choices. I'm making sure those choices have appropriate consequences." Next came the board positions. Charlie sat on the board of two prominent non-profits, a children's hospital and an arts foundation. Both organizations prided themselves on ethical leadership and transparent governance. Both organizations received detailed packets of information about Charlie's financial mismanagement, his legal troubles, and the questionable circumstances of his personal life. Janine didn't send the packets herself. She had Harrison do it through proper legal channels, with enough documentation that they couldn't ignore it. Within a week, Charlie was asked to resign from both boards. He refused at first, trying to paint himself as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife. But the evidence was too damning, too detailed, too public. He resigned under pressure, releasing statements about focusing on personal matters that fooled absolutely no one. Janine's coffee meeting with Ezra Thornton turned into dinner, then into a walk along the Charles River. then into a conversation that lasted until the bars closed and they were sitting on a bench watching the sun come up over the water. Still talking, he wasn't like Charlie. He didn't talk about money or status or connections. He talked about buildings as if they were alive, about sustainability as if it were sacred, about the responsibility of creating spaces where people could live and work and heal. He asked about her hotels not as investments, but as homes away from home. He wanted to know what made them special, what made guests feel welcomed, what made them places worth returning to. "You actually care about the people who stay there," he observed. "Most hotel owners think about occupancy rates. You think about whether someone's going to sleep well. Is that strange? It's rare. It's also probably why you're successful." When he asked about Charlie, she gave him the abbreviated version. Married to someone who turned out to be married to someone else. Discovered it through Instagram. Currently in the process of making sure he regrets every decision that led to that moment. "Remind me never to cross you," Ezra said with a smile that made her stomach flip in a way she hadn't felt in years. "You'd have to lie to me first. I'm surprisingly reasonable with people who tell the truth." He walked her back to her hotel. Didn't ask to come up. Just kissed her hand like someone from a different era and said he'd like to see her again if she was interested. She was interested, but over the next few weeks, as they saw each other more regularly, Janine started noticing things about Ezra that weren't exactly flaws, but weren't exactly perfections either. He got obsessively absorbed in his work, disappearing into projects for days and forgetting to respond to texts. His apartment was a disaster, papers and models and sketches covering every surface. He was terrible with money, spending everything he made on materials for personal projects he'd never monetize. "You're a mess," she told him one evening, surveying his living room, which looked like a tornado had hit an architecture studio. "I know," he said without defensiveness. "I've always been like this. My ex-girlfriend used to say I was married to my work and she was just the mistress." "Your ex-girlfriend. We broke up a year ago. She wanted someone more present, more domestic. I wanted someone who understood that sometimes I need to disappear into a project for a week. We weren't compatible. It was the first real glimpse of imperfection, and oddly, it made Janine like him more. He wasn't some perfect fantasy. He was a real person with real flaws and a past that had shaped him. Their first real argument happened over dinner. Ezra had been working on a sustainable housing project and gotten so absorbed, he'd forgotten they had plans. Janine waited at the restaurant for 30 minutes before he showed up, apologetic but also slightly resentful that she was upset. "I was in the middle of something important," he said, settling into his chair. "And I was sitting here alone looking like an idiot. You could have texted. I lost track of time. It happens when I'm working. It's disrespectful. I don't care how absorbed you are. You can take 10 seconds to send a message." He set down his menu, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not defensiveness, but genuine consideration. "You're right. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless. But I need you to understand that this is who I am. I get lost in projects. I forget to eat. I forget appointments. I forget the world exists. It's not personal. It feels personal when I'm the one being forgotten." They sat in tense silence for a moment before Ezra reached across the table. "I don't want to be like your ex-husband. I don't want to make you feel like you don't matter. But I also can't promise I'll never screw up again. I'm trying to be honest about my limitations." She appreciated the honesty, even while being frustrated by the situation. "I need you to try. That's all I'm asking. Try to remember that there's someone waiting for you." "I'll try. I promise I'll try." It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real was what Janine needed after years of Charlie's performative perfection that hid rot underneath. She reached across the table and took his hand, feeling the calluses from his work, the realness of him. "I'm not used to someone admitting their flaws," she said quietly. "Charlie spent our entire marriage pretending he was perfect while falling apart behind the scenes. At least you're honest about who you are. Honest and flawed." "That's my brand," Ezra said with a slight smile. But for what it's worth, I've never forgotten anyone the way I forget you sometimes. Usually I forget everyone equally. The fact that I feel guilty about forgetting you means you matter more than anyone else. That's possibly the worst compliment I've ever received. I'm working on my romantic skills. Give me time. The next morning, Piper called her. They'd been in sporadic contact through Harrison, working out the legal complications of her invalid marriage and her very valid pregnancy. Piper sounded different this time, stronger, angrier. My father knows everything. He wants to sue Charlie for fraud and breach of contract. Apparently, Charlie borrowed millions from him, with promises about investment opportunities that never materialized. Is your father violent? Janine asked, suddenly concerned despite herself. Not physically, but financially? He's about to destroy what's left of Charlie's life. I thought you should know. Why are you warning me? Because you helped me when you didn't have to. Because I'm not stupid enough to think you're doing this out of kindness. But you gave me information that protected me and my baby, so I'm returning the favor. Charlie's going to come after you harder now. He's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. She wasn't wrong. That afternoon, Charlie showed up at one of Janine's hotels, demanding to see her. When security turned him away, he started making a scene in the lobby, shouting about how she'd stolen everything from him, how she'd manipulated the boards, how she was ruining his life. The hotel manager handled it professionally, having Charlie removed without drama, but someone filmed it. By evening, the video was circulating on social media. Charlie Moore, former Boston elite, having a meltdown in a hotel lobby. The comments were brutal. People she'd never met were dissecting his character, his choices, his spectacular fall from grace. Janine watched the video once, then closed her laptop. This wasn't about public humiliation. This was about Charlie refusing to accept responsibility for his own actions. She could destroy his reputation all she wanted, but he would never learn, never grow, never become better. Some people were just fundamentally incapable of self-reflection. Her phone rang. Ezra, I saw the video. Are you okay? The question surprised her. Most people in her life would have asked if she'd planted the story or if she was enjoying the spectacle. He just wanted to know if she was okay. I'm fine. It's exhausting, honestly. I want to move on, and he keeps pulling me back into the drama. Then move on. Come to dinner. I found this incredible restaurant in the North End. They make pasta that will change your life, she laughed. That's a bold claim. I stand by it. Pick you up in an hour. Dinner was exactly what she needed. Ezra told her about a project he'd just finished in Barcelona, a low-income housing complex designed to maximize natural light and communal spaces. He showed her pictures on his phone, his enthusiasm infectious. His pride not in the awards he'd won, but in the families who now had better homes. You actually give a damn about people, she said, reaching for her wine. That's unusual in your field. It's unusual in any field. Most people are just going through the motions. You're not, though. I can tell. You build hotels, but you're really building experiences, memories, places where people feel safe. Is that your professional assessment? That's my personal observation. Professional assessment is that you're brilliant and sometimes intimidating, and I'm really glad you agreed to have coffee with me. She leaned forward. What if I said I'm glad too? What if I said I like that you're imperfect and honest about it? Then I'd say I'm very interested in seeing you again. And again after that. And possibly every day for the foreseeable future if you're willing to put up with my chaos. She kissed him, right there in the restaurant, with other diners around them and the waiter approaching with dessert menus. She kissed him because life was too short to wait for permission or perfect timing. She kissed him because he made her laugh and made her think and made her remember that she was more than just the wreckage of a failed marriage. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. That was unexpected. Good. I'm tired of predictable. Walking back to his car, Janine's phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. Charlie's lawyers filed a motion. He's claiming you manipulated the board to remove him illegally. It's baseless, but we'll need to respond. She showed the text to Ezra. This is my life right now. Constant legal battles with someone who can't accept that he destroyed his own life. How long is this going to go on? As long as it takes. I'm not backing down. He needs to learn that actions have consequences. Ezra stopped walking and turned to face her. Can I tell you something? You're handling this with incredible grace, but also it's okay to be tired of fighting. It's okay to want it to be over. Being strong doesn't mean you never get exhausted. She felt something crack inside her chest, a small fissure in the armor she'd built. I am tired. I'm so tired of thinking about him, dealing with him, strategizing around him. I want him to just disappear from my life completely. Then make that your goal. Not destroying him, not getting revenge, just getting him out of your life so thoroughly that he becomes irrelevant. It was the first time anyone had given her permission to stop fighting. Everyone else expected her to keep going, keep pushing, keep punishing Charlie for what he'd done. But Ezra was offering her something different, the possibility of peace. I'll think about it, she said softly. That night, alone in her hotel suite, Janine made a decision. She'd finish the legal battles that were already in motion. She'd protect her assets and her reputation, but she wouldn't seek out new ways to hurt Charlie. She wouldn't spend her energy on someone who didn't deserve any more of her time. She was done with revenge. She was ready for rebuilding. Chapter 5. The private investigator's gift. Imani requested a meeting in person, which meant the information was either explosive or complicated enough to require explanation. They met at Janine's hotel suite, and Imani arrived with a file so thick it needed 2 rubber bands to hold it together. You're not going to like this, Imani said, setting the file on the coffee table. Actually, you might like parts of it, but mostly it's just going to make you angry all over again. Janine poured them both coffee. Tell me, Charlie's been stealing from you for 5 years, not the gambling debts and the apartment and the cars. That was just what we found initially. This goes deeper. He's been siphoning money from your joint accounts through shell companies. Small amounts, regular withdrawals, designed to look like legitimate expenses. He's hidden approximately $40 million. The number hung in the air between them. 40 million. Not the millions she'd already reclaimed. Not the properties she'd already secured. 40 million additional dollars that Charlie had stolen and hidden. Where is it? Janine asked, her voice deadly calm. Offshore accounts mostly. Some in properties under fake names. Some in investments through brokers who don't ask questions. It's sophisticated enough that he clearly had help. Probably from someone who does this professionally. Can we recover it? Naive. With the right lawyers and enough time, probably. But here's where it gets interesting. Charlie didn't steal this money for himself. Well, not all of it. He stole it because he owed it to someone. Someone dangerous? Janine set down her coffee cup. Piper's father. Exactly. Dorian Whitlock. He owns casinos, but he's also got connections to people who make casino owners look like Boy Scouts. Charlie borrowed heavily from him 5 years ago. Gambling debts that spiraled. Instead of admitting he had a problem, Charlie kept borrowing, kept promising returns on investments that didn't exist. The marriage to Piper wasn't love. It was collateral, a way to keep Dorian from collecting. So he married her to save himself. And when that didn't work, when Dorian started asking questions about where his money was, Charlie stole from you to pay him back. Except he didn't pay him back fast enough. Dorian's still waiting for about 20 million. Janine processed this information piece by piece. Charlie hadn't just betrayed her emotionally and legally. He'd put her in danger. If Dorian Whitlock was as dangerous as Imani suggested, and if he connected Janine to Charlie's debts, she could become a target. Not for violence, probably, but for leverage. Does Dorian know about me? He does now. I made sure of it. I sent him an information packet showing that you and Charlie are separated, that you're not responsible for his debts, and that you're pursuing your own legal action against him. I also made it very clear that you're not someone to threaten or intimidate. Will that be enough? No. It should be. Dorian's a businessman. He goes after people who owe him money, not innocent parties. But I wanted you to know the full picture. Charlie's not just a cheater and a bigamist. He's in debt to someone who has the resources to make his life very uncomfortable. After Imani left, Janine sat with the file, reading through every page, every transaction, every lie Charlie had constructed over 5 years. She'd thought she knew the extent of his betrayal. She'd been wrong. He'd been systematically robbing her while sleeping next to her, while telling her he loved her, while building a life that was nothing but elaborate fiction. Her phone rang. Harrison. I heard from Imani. This changes everything, Janine. We need to be strategic about how we move forward. I want to talk to Piper, not through lawyers. I want to meet with her face to face. Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm sure. Set it up. Somewhere private. They met at one of Janine's smaller hotels, the boutique property on Commonwealth Avenue that catered to travelers who valued discretion. Piper arrived looking exhausted and very pregnant, her hands resting protectively on her stomach. "Thank you for meeting me," Piper said, sitting down carefully. "I wasn't sure you would. I have questions. You're going to answer them honestly, or this conversation is over. Understood?" Understood. "Did you know your father loaned Charlie money?" Piper nodded miserably. "Not at first. I thought Charlie was wealthy on his own. He certainly acted like it. But about 6 months into our relationship, I overheard my father and Charlie arguing. That's when I learned about the debt. My father told Charlie that the only way he'd forgive it was if Charlie married me. And you agreed to this." "The dad told I was stupid and in love. I thought my father was being overprotective. I thought if Charlie married me, it would prove he loved me, and not just my father's money. I didn't know he was already married to you. I swear I didn't know that until recently." Janine studied her, looking for deception, finding only desperation and genuine regret. "Why did you agree to see me?" "Because you're the only person who's been honest with me through this entire nightmare. Everyone else, including my own father, has been using me as a chess piece. You could have let me drown. Instead, you threw me a life raft. I want to know why." It was a fair question. Janine considered how to answer it truthfully. "Because hurting you doesn't hurt, Charlie. You're collateral damage just like I am. But you have information I need, and I think we can help each other." "How?" "Your father wants his money back." "Charlie doesn't have it, but I know where it is. What if I told you I could help your father recover his money, but only if he agrees to leave me completely out of this? No threats, no intimidation, no attempts to collect from me." Piper leaned back, processing. "You want me to broker a deal between you and my father. I want you to be the messenger. I'll give your father information that leads him to the money Charlie stole. In exchange, he signs a legal document stating that I'm not responsible for any of Charlie's debts, past or present. Your father gets his money. I get protection. Charlie gets exactly what he deserves." "Which is?" "Your father's full attention and whatever consequences come with that." Piper smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd finally found a way to stop being a victim. "I'll talk to him. But I want something too." "What?" "Help getting away from all of this. My father's going to want me to come home, to let him control my life and my baby's life. I need resources to build something independent. A trust fund that he can't touch, maybe. Or connections that help me start over somewhere new." Janine respected the ask. Piper was learning to negotiate, to advocate for herself, to stop being passive in her own life. "I can do that. But you have to be willing to testify about everything you know if this goes to court. Charlie's going to try to play victim. We need to make sure everyone knows exactly what he is." "I'll testify. I want him to face consequences." They shook hands, two women who should have been enemies finding common ground in shared betrayal. After Piper left, Janine called Desmond. "I need you to set up a trust. 20 million. Beneficiary is Piper Whitlock and her unborn child. The money is untouchable by her father or anyone else. It's managed by independent trustees until the child turns 18, with distributions for education, housing, and medical care. That's incredibly generous for someone who stole your husband. She didn't steal him. He was never mine to steal. She's just another person he lied to. And unlike Charlie, she's actually trying to make better choices. That evening, Ezra took her to a gallery opening, Simone's Gallery, featuring an installation about rebuilding after disaster. Art made from broken things, transformed into something beautiful. The timing felt almost orchestrated by the universe. "Your friend is talented," Ezra said, studying a sculpture made from shattered mirrors that somehow reflected light instead of absorbing it. "She's brilliant. She's also been my sanity through all of this." Simone found them in the crowd, pulling Janine into a hug that lasted longer than necessary.
"You look happy."
"Actually happy, not just pretending. I might be. It's confusing. It's allowed. You're allowed to be happy even while your life is complicated." She looked at Ezra. "You're the architect. Desmond mentioned you. I'm the architect. Also the guy who's desperately hoping he's not moving too fast." "Are you moving too fast?" Simone asked Janine directly. "Probably, but I don't care. I've spent years moving at the appropriate pace, being reasonable, being patient. Look where that got me. Maybe fast is exactly what I need." Later, at Ezra's cluttered apartment in Back Bay, Janine saw how he lived. Books everywhere, sketches tacked to walls, models of buildings covering every surface. It was chaotic but intentional, messy but creative. It was the space of someone who actually lived in their space, instead of just existing in it. "This is who you are," she said, picking up a model of a school he'd designed. "You bring beauty into the world. That's not a small thing. What do you bring?" he asked, coming to stand behind her. "Hotels, properties, investments. No, you bring safety. You create places where people can rest, where they can be vulnerable and know they're protected. That's not a small thing either." She turned to face him, this man who saw her more clearly in a few weeks than Charlie had in years. "I'm going to hurt again eventually. Everyone does. What if I'm too damaged from this? Then we'll figure it out together. But I don't think you're damaged. I think you're healing. And healing people are the strongest ones, because they know what it takes to put yourself back together." They slept together that night, not frantically but carefully, like people who understood that intimacy was about trust as much as desire. Afterward, lying in his bed watching the city lights through the window, Janine realized she'd been holding her breath for weeks, maybe months, maybe years, and she was finally ready to exhale. Chapter 6. The Dominoes Fall. Boston society operated on an intricate system of unspoken rules and understood hierarchies. Charlie had always been good at navigating that system, using charm and connections to maintain his position. But charm only worked when people wanted to be charmed, and after the gossip columns, the board removals, and the video of his lobby meltdown, people had stopped wanting to associate with him altogether. Janine watched the social death happen from a distance, receiving updates from friends and acquaintances who felt compelled to inform her about Charlie's declining status. He'd been uninvited from a charity gala. His regular table at 3 restaurants had mysteriously been booked by other patrons. His calls to former colleagues went unreturned. Boston was quietly, efficiently freezing him out. She didn't orchestrate this part. She didn't have to. The city had made its own decision about Charlie Moore, and the verdict was decisive. What surprised her most was how quickly it happened. She'd expected resistance, people defending Charlie out of loyalty or friendship. Instead, she watched Boston society perform what amounted to a collective shrug. He'd always been tolerated more than loved, she realized. People had put up with him because of her, because of their combined social capital. Without her as his shield, he was just another man who'd made bad choices and run out of chances. Simone called her one afternoon with an update. "You need to hear this. Charlie tried to get a table at Sorellina last night. They told him they were fully booked. I was sitting right there, and I watched them seat a walk-in couple 5 minutes later. That's brutal. That's Boston. The city's made its choice. You won, Janine. Not because you destroyed him, but because he destroyed himself, and everyone watched it happen. Constance finally appeared at one of Janine's hotels, asking the front desk if she could please speak with Janine Spencer just for a few minutes. The desk clerk called up, and Janine, against her better judgment, agreed to meet her in the restaurant. Constance looked older than the last time Janine had seen her. The Instagram post had been months ago, but those months had carved new lines into her face, added grey to her hair, stolen some essential brightness from her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness," Constance said before Janine could even sit down. "I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know how deeply sorry I am. I thought I was being inclusive by posting that photo. I thought you knew. I thought Charlie had told you about everything. I was wrong. I was stupid. And I've destroyed any chance of us having a relationship." Janine ordered coffee before responding. Let Constance sit with her words for a moment. Let them settle. Let them become real. "You posted a photo celebrating your son's bigamy. You didn't think to confirm with me first? You didn't think to question why your son was getting married without his wife present?" I should have. I should have asked 1,000 questions, but Charlie has always been able to convince me of anything. He told me you two had agreed to separate quietly, that you were both moving on, that this was friendly and mutual. I wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than accepting that my son is a liar. Your son is more than a liar. He's a thief and a fraud. Did you know he stole 40 million from me? Did you know he owes money to dangerous people? Did you know he's been running from consequences his entire life because you never taught him that actions matter? Constance's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I know all of that now. Flynn made sure I knew everything. Every terrible thing Charlie has done, every way he's failed, every person he's hurt. I spent my life protecting him from consequences. You're right about that. And now I'm watching him destroy himself, and I can't stop it, and I don't know how to help him." "You can't help him. He has to decide to help himself. But that's not why you're here. You're here because you want absolution from me. You want me to tell you it's okay, that we can move forward, that I understand. Do you understand?" Janine considered the question seriously. Did she understand how a mother could enable a son's worst behaviors out of love? Did she understand how someone could be so blinded by family loyalty that they participated in betrayal? "I understand that you love your son. I don't forgive you, Constance. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I understand." Constance nodded, accepting this small offering. "Can I ask what you're going to do now?" "I'm going to live my life. I'm seeing someone. I'm expanding my hotels into Europe. I'm creating a foundation to help women escape financial abuse. I'm doing everything except thinking about Charlie. He's not doing well. He's drinking heavily. He's isolated. He's talking about leaving Boston. Then he should leave. Maybe somewhere new will give him the chance to become someone better. Or maybe he'll just bring his problems with him. Either way, it's not my concern anymore." Constance reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It was old, faded at the edges. Janine and Charlie on their wedding day, but not the formal portraits. This was a candid shot, both of them laughing at something off camera, looking genuinely happy. "I found this the other day," Constance said, sliding it across the table. "I thought about keeping it, but it's not mine to keep. You should have it. Not because of what it represents now, but because that happiness was real once. You deserved better than what he gave you, but the love you felt was real." Janine stared at the photo. She barely remembered that moment, that version of herself who believed in forever. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I want you to know that I saw how much you loved him. I saw how hard you tried. And I'm sorry that we, his family, we failed you as much as he did." After Constance left, Janine sat with the photo for a long time. She didn't cry. She just looked at that younger version of herself and felt a strange kind of grief, not for the marriage, but for the innocence, for believing that love was enough, for not knowing yet that some people were incapable of meeting you halfway. She tucked the photo into her bag, not to display but to keep. Evidence that she'd been capable of that kind of open-hearted love once. Maybe she could be again, Ezra called while she was still sitting in the restaurant. "What are you doing tonight?" "Nothing planned. Why?" "Come to London with me. I have to fly back for a meeting. It's only a few days. You can see my city, meet my friends, eat food that will make you forget Boston exists." "That's spontaneous." "Is that a no?" She smiled. "That's a yes. When do we leave?" They flew out that night on Ezra's ticket, Janine upgrading them both to first class because she could and because she wanted to. London revealed itself through rain and grey skies, but Ezra navigated the city like someone who loved every brick and cobblestone. He took her to his favourite pub, introduced her to his colleagues, showed her buildings he'd designed that somehow felt both modern and timeless. His friends were architects and artists and teachers, people who cared about craft and community instead of status and wealth. They asked about her hotels with genuine curiosity, wanted to know about sustainable practices and worker conditions and guest experiences. Nobody asked about Charlie. Nobody seemed to care about Boston society drama. "Your friends are lovely," she told Ezra as they walked along the Thames at sunset. "They're real. That's what I love about them. No pretense, no performance, just people trying to do good work and live good lives. Is that what you want? A good life? I want a meaningful life. Good is subjective, but meaningful? That's about impact, about leaving things better than you found them." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "I'm falling in love with you. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that this early, but I'm tired of playing games with my feelings. I'm tired of pretending to be less than I am. So I'm telling you, I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me, and I'm doing it anyway." Ezra didn't look surprised or overwhelmed. He looked delighted. "I fell in love with you the first time we had coffee. You talked about architecture like it mattered, like buildings were more than just structures. You understood that spaces shape people, that what we build changes how we live. I thought, this woman gets it. She understands." "Gets what?" "That we're all just trying to build something that lasts, something that matters, something beautiful." They kissed on the bridge with London spreading out around them, and Janine thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, she'd discovered her husband had married someone else. Now she was in London, kissing an architect who made her feel things she'd thought were reserved for movies and novels. Life wasn't fair or predictable, but sometimes it surprised you with moments of perfect, unexpected joy. Back in Boston, Flynn texted her, "Charlie's leaving town, moving to Oregon, starting over. Thought you should know." She showed the text to Ezra on the flight home. "He's running away. Maybe he's actually trying to change. Distance might be good for him. Or he's just going to create the same problems in a different city. Does it matter to you anymore?" She considered the question honestly. Did it matter? Did she care what happened to Charlie now that he was no longer her problem, no longer her husband, no longer anything except a cautionary tale about marrying the wrong person? "No," she said finally. "It doesn't matter. He can go wherever he wants. He can do whatever he wants. I'm done carrying him in my thoughts." The foundation she'd created to help women escape financial abuse launched with a gala that raised $12 million in one night. Janine gave a speech about recognizing the signs of financial control, about protecting yourself legally, about building independence that couldn't be taken away. People cried, people donated. People told her their own stories of betrayal and survival. Simone found her afterward, mascara smudged from tears. "That was the most powerful thing I've ever heard. You took what happened to you and turned it into something that helps people. That's not revenge. That's alchemy. I just wanted something good to come from all that pain. It did. You did." The professional demolition of Charlie was complete. He'd lost his board seats, his memberships, his reputation, his money, and finally his foothold in the city where he'd once been somebody. The life he'd built on lies and stolen money had collapsed entirely. But Janine realized that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that she'd rebuilt. She'd taken the ruins of her marriage and constructed something new, something stronger, something entirely her own. Chapter 7. The Unexpected Confrontation. 6 months after the Instagram post that detonated her life, Janine received a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter delivered to her hotel. The return address was from Oregon, from Charlie. She held it for a long time without opening it, wondering what words he thought could possibly matter now, what apology he believed would make any difference. Ezra was in London for a project, so she was alone in her suite when she finally tore open the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Charlie's familiar scrawl. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. It was a confession he'd been to therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind where you show up to check a box, but the kind where you actually have to face yourself. He'd gotten sober, joined a support group, found a job at a credit union helping people manage debt. He wrote about how he'd spent his entire life running from discomfort, from accountability, from the voice in his head that told him he wasn't enough. He wrote about how he'd used money and status and even people as shields against his own inadequacy. He wrote about how destroying their marriage was the worst thing he'd ever done, but it forced him to finally see himself clearly. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for anything. He just wanted her to know that he was trying to be better and that she deserved to know her decision to leave him had ultimately saved his life. Janine set the letter down and stared out the window at the city below. She felt surprisingly calm. The letter didn't change anything. It didn't erase what he'd done or make her trust him or want him back. But it did give her something she hadn't expected, confirmation that leaving had been the right choice. Not just for her, but for him too. She called Flynn, who'd become an unexpected friend over the months. "Did you know Charlie wrote to me?" He mentioned he was going to. I told him it was a terrible idea, but he insisted. Said he needed to own what he did without making excuses. It was actually well written, honest. He's been working on himself. I didn't think he had it in him, honestly. But he's been consistent, showing up to meetings, keeping his job, staying sober. It's like he finally hit bottom hard enough that he had to change or die. I'm not going to respond to the letter. I don't think he expects you to. He just needed to say it. How are you doing, Flynn? This must have been hard on you too, Flynn sighed. My family imploded. My brother is in Oregon, rebuilding from scratch. My mother is seeing a therapist 3 times a week, trying to process her role in enabling him. I'm just trying to show up for my students and pretend I have any wisdom to offer about life when my own family is such a disaster. You're nothing like him, you know. You're kind and honest and exactly the person your students need. Thanks, Janine. That means more than you know. That weekend, Simone dragged Janine to a fundraiser for the Arts Foundation that had recently removed Charlie from their board. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but Janine went anyway because avoiding places Charlie used to inhabit meant letting him control her life, even in absence. The event was exactly what she expected. Wealthy people congratulating themselves for supporting the arts, expensive wine flowing freely, classical music providing an elegant soundtrack to networking and gossip. She was talking to a donor about expanding her foundation when someone tapped her shoulder. She turned and found herself face to face with Dorothy Kensington, the board chair who'd voted to remove Charlie from Spencer Ventures. "I wanted to thank you," Dorothy said without preamble, "for handling that situation with such professionalism. You could have made it ugly and public and vindictive. Instead, you presented facts and let the board make the right decision. I wasn't interested in drama. I was interested in protecting what I built. You did more than that. You showed everyone in this city how to handle betrayal with dignity. I've been watching you since then. The foundation you started, the way you've moved forward, the grace you've shown even when no one would have blamed you for burning everything down. You're remarkable." Janine felt something warm bloom in her chest. Recognition from someone like Dorothy, someone who'd built her own empire and navigated her own challenges, meant more than she'd expected. I appreciate that. I didn't always feel very graceful. Grace isn't about never feeling angry or hurt. It's about choosing how you channel those feelings. You chose to build instead of destroy. That's the definition of grace. Later, standing on the terrace overlooking the city, Janine called Ezra. It was early morning in London, but he answered anyway, voice rough with sleep. "Everything okay?" "Everything is strange and good, and I miss you." "I miss you too." 3 more days and I'll be back. Then I want to talk to you about something." "Should I be worried?" "Only if the idea of me asking you to move to London terrifies you." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "That's a big conversation." "It is, which is why I want to have it face to face. But I'm putting it out there now so you can think about it." After they hung up, Janine sat with the possibility. London, a new city, a new life. A complete break from Boston and everything that had happened here. It was terrifying and thrilling, and exactly the kind of leap she'd spent her whole life being too careful to take. Her phone buzzed. Text from Piper. "Had the baby. A girl. Named her Audrey. Thought you'd want to know. Thank you for everything." Janine smiled at her phone. Piper had moved across the country, enrolled in school, started building a life separate from her father's influence and Charlie's damage. The trust fund Janine had set up ensured she and Audrey would be protected. Another ending that wasn't really an ending, just a transformation into something new. That night, Janine couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Ezra's question, about London, about what it would mean to leave Boston behind. This city had been her home, her battlefield, her proving ground. She'd built an empire here. But she'd also been betrayed here, broken here, forced to rebuild from ruins. Maybe it was time for something new. Maybe she'd extracted everything Boston had to teach her. Maybe the next chapter of her life was supposed to happen somewhere else entirely. She opened her laptop and started researching. London hotel market, expansion opportunities, visa requirements, schools if they ever had children, neighborhoods where she could imagine living. She made lists, calculated possibilities, let herself dream about a future that wasn't defined by her past. By morning, she'd made a decision. When Ezra asked her to move to London, she was going to say yes. Chapter 8. The Revelation. Ezra returned from London with a ring. Not an engagement ring, he clarified immediately, seeing her face. A promise ring. A symbol of intention and commitment, and the conversation they were about to have. They were in his apartment, rain pattering against the windows, the city spread out below them like a promise. He handed her a small box and watched her open it with an expression that was equal parts nervous and excited. The ring was silver, simple, beautiful, engraved on the inside, "Build with me." "I'm not proposing," Ezra said carefully. "Not yet, but I'm telling you that I want to. I'm telling you that I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just dating or seeing where things go. I want to move furniture and argue about paint colors and wake up next to you every morning. I want all of it." Janine slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. "I've been thinking about London, and I want to come with you. Not because I'm running from Boston, but because I'm running towards something better. Toward you, toward possibility, toward a life that isn't defined by who I used to be married to." He kissed her then, deep and certain, the kind of kiss that felt like sealing a promise. "I love you. I should have said that first. I love you, Janine Spencer, and I want to spend my life proving that not all men are idiots. The bar is low, but I appreciate the commitment." They spent the weekend planning. Janine could run her hotels remotely, visit regularly for board meetings and major decisions. She'd keep her properties in Boston, but establish a presence in London. Maybe open a boutique hotel there eventually. Maybe create a European headquarters for her foundation. The possibilities multiplied the more they talked. But first, she had to actually close this chapter of her life properly. She'd been operating in a state of extended transition, keeping one foot in her old life while testing the waters of something new. It was time to commit fully to the future she wanted. She called Harrison. I want to liquidate everything that connects me to Charlie. Any remaining joint investments, any properties we bought together, anything that still has his name attached. I want it clean. That's gonna take months. Then we start now. She also called the detective agency Imani worked for and requested a final report. Everything they'd found, everything they knew, compiled into one comprehensive document. She wanted the full picture of Charlie's betrayal, not for revenge anymore, but for closure. She wanted to see it all laid out so she could file it away in her memory and never have to wonder if there was more she didn't know. The report arrived a week later. It was devastating in its completeness. Charlie had been cheating on her for the majority of their marriage, not just with Piper, but with other women too. He'd spent their money on gifts for mistresses, trips he claimed were solo business travel, apartments and cars, and an entire life that ran parallel to theirs. He'd been stealing from her systematically since they'd gotten married, always small amounts, always careful enough that she wouldn't notice until it was too late. But the report also revealed something she hadn't expected. Charlie had kept journals, digital files on a cloud server that he'd abandoned when he fled to Oregon. Imani had accessed them, and with Janine's permission, included excerpts in the report. The journals were painful to read. Charlie writing about how inadequate he felt compared to her success. How he resented that she made more money, had better instincts, commanded more respect. How he'd started stealing from her not because he needed the money, but because it made him feel powerful, like he was taking something she didn't know about, like he had control over some aspect of their relationship. He'd written about falling into gambling because the risk made him feel alive in a way his marriage didn't, about meeting Piper and seeing an opportunity to solve his debts, while also having someone who looked at him like he was successful, instead of like she was waiting for him to catch up. He'd written about the moment he decided to marry Piper, knowing it was bigamy, knowing it would destroy everything, but feeling like he was already destroyed, and at least this way, he'd go down making a choice instead of drowning in his own inadequacy. The final entry was from the week before his mother posted the Instagram photo. He wrote, I'm going to lose everything. Janine will find out. It's inevitable. Part of me wants her to find out. I'm so tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm so tired of failing her every day and watching her not notice, because she's too busy succeeding at everything. When this ends, maybe I can finally stop performing. Janine closed the report and sat in silence for a long time. The journals didn't excuse anything. They didn't make his betrayal hurt less or make her trust him again. But they gave her something she hadn't expected. Understanding. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Charlie had destroyed their marriage because he'd been destroying himself, and he hadn't known how to ask for help or admit he was drowning. She read one entry again, this one from years earlier. Janine asked me today if I was happy. I lied and said yes. The truth is, I don't remember the last time I felt happy. I feel trapped in this life I built, this persona I created. She deserves someone who can meet her where she is. I'm not that person. I don't know if I ever was. The sadness of it struck her unexpectedly. Not sadness for their marriage, but sadness for Charlie, who'd spent years suffocating under the weight of his own inadequacy and chose destruction over honesty. She wondered what would have happened if he'd just told her the truth. If he'd admitted he was struggling, drowning, desperate, would she have helped him? Could she have? The answer was yes, she would have tried. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe he couldn't bear to be helped by her, couldn't accept being vulnerable with someone he'd always needed to impress. She called Flynn. Did you know Charlie kept journals? He mentioned them once. Said writing helped him process things. Why? The investigator found them. I read them. He was miserable, Flynn, for years, and he didn't tell anyone. That sounds like Charlie. He's always been good at suffering in silence and then exploding spectacularly. I'm not saying this to excuse him. I just wanted you to know that he was hurting too. I don't think that changes anything, but it feels important to acknowledge. You're kinder than I would be in your position. But thank you for telling me. It helps to know he wasn't just cruel for cruelty's sake. He was just drowning and taking everyone down with him. How are you doing with all of this? I know I keep asking, but it can't be easy watching your family implode. Flynn was quiet for a moment. Honestly, it's liberating. I've spent my whole life in Charlie's shadow, being the good son, the responsible one, the one who didn't make waves. Watching him face consequences is teaching me that maybe honesty is worth the risk. Maybe being real with people is better than being perfect. That evening, Janine had dinner with Simone at their favorite restaurant in the North End. She told her about the journals, about the decision to move to London, about feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified by all the changes happening at once. You've transformed, Simone said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. When this all started, you were so controlled, so contained. Now you're making spontaneous decisions, moving to another country, letting yourself feel things. It's beautiful to watch. I don't feel beautiful. I feel messy and uncertain. Messy and uncertain is where growth happens. Perfect and controlled is where you stagnate. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too busy being perfect to notice. They laughed, the sound carrying through the restaurant, and Janine realized she was happier than she'd been in years. Not despite everything that had happened, but because of it. The destruction of her marriage had forced her to examine everything about her life, to question what she really wanted, to choose differently. She'd chosen Ezra. She'd chosen honesty over performance. She'd chosen growth over safety, and those choices were terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Back at her hotel, Janine started sorting through what to take to London and what to leave behind. Clothes, jewelry, books, the accumulated possessions of a life lived in one place. She packed light, taking only what mattered, leaving the rest for charity or storage or whatever made sense. She found her wedding photo tucked in the back of a drawer. She and Charlie on the steps of the venue, both smiling, both believing they had forever. She looked at it for a long time, trying to remember that version of herself, that woman who believed in fairy tales and happily ever after. She didn't rip it up or burn it or make some dramatic gesture. She just put it in an envelope and filed it away, evidence of a life that used to exist, a marriage that had been real, even if it ended badly. She'd loved him once. That mattered, even if it wasn't enough. But she also found something else in that drawer, a card Charlie had given her on their first anniversary. She'd forgotten about it completely. The front had a simple illustration of two birds building a nest together. Inside, in Charlie's handwriting, "Thank you for choosing to build a life with me. I promise to be worthy of that choice every single day." He'd broken that promise so thoroughly that the words felt like fiction now, but once upon a time, he'd meant them, or at least, he'd wanted to mean them. She put the card in the envelope with the photo, not as treasures to keep, but as artifacts of a story that had ended. Sometimes relationships failed, not because people didn't love each other, but because one person didn't love themselves enough to be honest. Charlie had been his own worst enemy, and she'd been collateral damage in his war with himself. Her phone rang. "Ezra, I found us a flat in Notting Hill. It has a garden and space for your office, and it's close to the tube. Want to see pictures? Send them all, every angle." She spent the rest of the night looking at photos of their future home, making plans, dreaming about what came next. And for the first time since the Instagram post that changed everything, Janine felt ready. Ready to close this chapter, ready to start the next one, ready to build something new with someone who actually deserved her. Chapter 9. The beginning of something real. The hardest goodbyes were the unexpected ones. Janine had anticipated feeling emotional about leaving Boston, about closing her office and selling her apartment and packing up a life. But she hadn't expected how difficult it would be to say goodbye to Flynn, who'd become a genuine friend through the wreckage of his brother's choices. They met for coffee one last time at the shop in Cambridge, where they'd first talked months ago. He looked tired, his teacher exhaustion compounded by family drama exhaustion. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks," she observed. "Parent-teacher conferences. Also, my mother is in crisis again because Charlie stopped answering her calls. She thinks something terrible has happened to him." "Has it?" "No. He's just actually working on himself, and part of that is setting boundaries with family members who enabled his worst behaviors. Mum's taking it personally?" "That must be hard for you." Flynn shrugged. "I spent my whole childhood watching her make excuses for Charlie. Now I'm watching her face the consequences of that. It's sad, but it's also necessary. Some people only learn through pain." "I'm going to miss you. That's weird to say to my ex-husband's brother, but it's true. I'm going to miss you too. You were the best thing that happened to our family, and we wrecked it. That's our loss to carry." "You didn't wreck anything. You were the only one who told the truth. For what it's worth, I think this move is exactly what you should be doing. Charlie ran away to Oregon to escape consequences. You're moving to London to chase possibility. Those are completely different things." Before she left, Flynn gave her a book, a collection of essays about rebuilding after disaster, about finding meaning in chaos, about transformation through destruction. "For the plane," he said, "I think you'll like it." Simone threw her a going-away party at the gallery, inviting everyone who mattered from Janine's Boston life. Desmond and Harrison and the friends who'd stood by her through everything. There was wine and laughter and speeches that made her cry. Simone presented her with a painting, an abstract piece in blues and silvers that somehow captured the feeling of starting over. "This is about you," Simone explained to the room, "about taking something broken and making it beautiful, about refusing to let someone else's destruction define you." Janine hugged her fiercely. "Come visit me in London. Often. You couldn't keep me away." The foundation she'd created was thriving. She'd established a strong board, hired an executive director who understood the mission viscerally, and created sustainable funding through endowments and corporate partnerships. It would continue without her daily involvement, which was exactly how it should be. She'd built something bigger than herself. Her hotels were running smoothly, managed by teams she trusted completely. She'd promoted Rebecca, her assistant, to a senior position. She'd restructured everything so she could oversee operations remotely while still being present for major decisions. The empire she'd built wasn't dependent on her physical presence. It was dependent on the systems and people she'd put in place. On her last night in Boston, Janine walked through the city alone, down Newbury Street, where she'd had her first office, through the public garden, where she used to read contracts on lunch breaks, past the hotel where she'd stayed after selling the house. Every corner held memories, some good, some devastating, all part of the story of how she'd become who she was. She ended up on the waterfront, watching boats move across the harbour, lights reflecting in dark water. A text came through from Ezra. "Landing in Boston tomorrow morning. Can't wait to start our life together." She typed back, "It already started. This is just the next chapter." The movers came at dawn. Everything she was taking to London fit into a surprisingly small shipment. Clothes, books, art, the essentials of a life. Everything else was donated or sold or given to friends. She'd learned from watching Charlie's accumulation of possessions that things didn't make you happy or successful or loved. Things were just things. Ezra arrived as the movers were loading the last boxes. He looked exhausted from the flight, but happy, pulling her into a hug that felt like coming home. "Ready?" he asked. "Completely." The flight to London was smooth. Janine slept most of the way, her head on Ezra's shoulder, the promise ring on her finger, catching light through the window. When she woke, they were descending into Heathrow, and below them was the city that would be her new home. The flat in Notting Hill was perfect, light-filled and spacious, with hardwood floors and tall windows, and that garden Ezra had mentioned. Their furniture arrived the next day, and they spent a week unpacking, arranging, making the space theirs. Ezra's architectural models mixed with Janine's art collection, his books shelved next to hers, their lives blending naturally, easily, like they'd always been meant to share space. She met his friends properly. Ben, a landscape architect who talked about urban green spaces with the passion most people reserved for sports. Catherine, a professor who studied sustainable housing and had opinions about everything. David, who ran a non-profit providing architectural services to underserved communities. They were brilliant, passionate, unpretentious. They welcomed her into their circle without hesitation. "You've made Ezra happier than I've ever seen him," Catherine told her at a dinner party. "He talks about you constantly. It's actually annoying how in love he is." "I'll try to be less lovable," Janine deadpanned. "Please don't. It's refreshing to see him with someone who matches his intensity." Work continued remotely. Janine video conferenced with her teams, reviewed reports, made decisions about expansion and renovation and hiring. She started exploring the London hotel market, meeting with brokers and developers, imagining what a Spencer property might look like in this city. The business didn't slow down, it just relocated. She also started working with European organizations that supported women escaping financial abuse. Her foundation could expand internationally, could help women across borders and cultures, could become something even bigger than she'd imagined. The work gave her purpose beyond just running hotels. It gave her a way to turn her pain into protection for others. 3 months into their London life, Ezra took her to Cornwall for the weekend. They stayed at a small inn overlooking the ocean, walked along cliffs, ate fish and chips in a pub that had been there for centuries. On their last evening, they sat on a beach watching the sun set over the water, and he turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I have a question," he said. "And before you panic, it's not what you think." "What do I think?" "You think I'm about to propose." "Are you?" "No, not yet. But I am going to ask you something important." She waited, heart pounding, unsure what was coming. "Will you build a life with me? Not just live together, not just see where things go, but actually build something intentional and permanent. Will you commit to making this work even when it's hard, even when we disagree, even when life gets complicated?" That's basically a proposal. It's a pre-proposal. I want to know you're all in before I make it official. Janine looked at him, this man who'd appeared in her life at exactly the moment she'd needed someone to show her what healthy love looked like, who'd been patient and honest and steady, who'd helped her heal without trying to fix her, who'd loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. "I'm all in," she said. "I've been all in since that first coffee, maybe even before." "Good. Because I'm planning an elaborate proposal, and I didn't want to waste the effort if you were going to say no." She laughed and kissed him as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. And she thought about beginnings, about how sometimes the worst endings create space for the best beginnings, about how she'd traveled across an ocean to find home. Back in London, life settled into a rhythm. Work and dinners with friends and weekends exploring the city. Ezra working on his projects, Janine managing her empire, both of them coming together at the end of each day to share stories and wine and the small moments that make a life. One evening, her phone buzzed with a message from Piper, photos of baby Audrey, now several months old, chubby and smiling. A note, she's healthy and happy, starting school next month. "Thank you for giving us this chance." Janine showed the photos to Ezra. "That's one good thing that came from all of this. She gets to start over. You gave her that. You could have left her to deal with the consequences alone. You chose differently, because I remembered what it felt like to be collateral damage in someone else's war. That night, lying in bed with Ezra asleep beside her, Janine thought about Charlie, not with anger or pain, but with a strange sort of distant compassion. She hoped he was actually changing in Oregon. She hoped he was learning to be honest with himself. She hoped he found some version of peace, but mostly she just didn't think about him at all. Her life had become full of other things, better things, things she'd chosen instead of things she'd settled for, and that difference made all the difference. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. The proposal happened on a Tuesday, which was somehow perfect because it was so ordinary. No grand gestures or planned events, just the two of them, having breakfast in their kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows, and Ezra suddenly getting down on one knee beside the table. "I know I said I was planning something elaborate," he started, "but I woke up this morning and realized I didn't want to wait. I don't want another day to pass without asking you to marry me." The ring was simple and stunning, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "I wanted something that reminded me of your eyes," he explained. "Something unique instead of traditional." "Yes," she said before he could finish his speech. "Absolutely yes." They got married in the Cotswolds in early autumn, surrounded by people who genuinely loved them. Ezra's family came from various parts of England and Scotland. Janine's sisters flew over with their families. Simone was there with her new girlfriend. Desmond and Harrison came together, both claiming they needed to witness this miracle in person. Flynn arrived alone, still teaching in Boston, still the good one in his family. Constance sent a gift. The painting from Janine's childhood that her mother had sold years ago, tracked down and purchased at significant expense. The note with it said, "I can't give you back the time or undo the hurt, but I can honor the woman you've always been. Congratulations." Janine cried when she opened it, and Ezra held her while she processed the complicated emotions of receiving grace from someone who'd caused damage. The painting hung in their living room now, a reminder that people could change, could grow, could try to make amends even when forgiveness wasn't guaranteed. The ceremony was short and meaningful. No traditional vows, just promises they wrote themselves. Ezra promised to always be honest, to build a life that reflected their values, to love her on both easy and difficult days. Janine promised to be vulnerable, to choose partnership over independence when it mattered, to trust that not all love ended in betrayal. When she spoke her vows, her voice didn't shake. She looked directly at Ezra and said, "I promise to believe in us even when it's scary. I promise to remember that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up. I promise to build something with you that's stronger than anything I could build alone." The guests were quiet, some crying, all of them understanding that these weren't just wedding vows. They were a woman reclaiming her faith in love after it had nearly destroyed her. During dinner, Janine's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, but she recognized the Oregon area code. "Charlie, saw the announcement. Congratulations. You deserve happiness. I'm genuinely glad you found it." She showed the message to Ezra. "Should I respond?" "Do you want to?" She thought about it, considered writing back something gracious or final, but then she realized she didn't need to respond. Charlie's journey was his own now, separate from hers, no longer requiring her participation or acknowledgement. She deleted the message and put her phone away. The honeymoon was 3 weeks in Japan. They stayed in ryokans and explored temples and ate food that redefined their understanding of cuisine. They talked about the future, about maybe having children, about opening a Spencer property in London, about the life they were building together. "Are you happy?" Ezra asked one evening in Kyoto, both of them soaking in an onsen with mountains visible in the distance. "I'm more than happy. I'm whole. I didn't realize I'd been living as half a person until I became complete again." "You were always whole," he said, reaching for her hand under the water. You just couldn't see it because someone convinced you that you needed them to be complete. You never did. Back in London, life resumed with new depth. Janine opened a boutique hotel in Mayfair, a property that reflected everything she'd learned about hospitality and care. It became one of the most sought-after hotels in the city, known for service that felt personal, spaces that felt safe, attention to detail that made guests feel seen. The foundation expanded across Europe, helping thousands of women recognize and escape financial abuse. Janine traveled regularly between London and Boston, maintaining both lives, refusing to choose between her past achievements and her present happiness. She got pregnant on a rainy November evening, found out on a Tuesday morning while Ezra was at a construction site, called him immediately, voice shaking with joy and terror. They cried together over the phone, both understanding how much this changed everything and how ready they were for it anyway. Her daughter was born in July, tiny and perfect, with Ezra's smile and Janine's determination already evident in how she gripped their fingers. They named her Thea, after no one, owing nothing to family legacy or expectation. Just Thea, their daughter, the beginning of something entirely new. Holding her daughter for the first time, Janine thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The woman who'd believed in fairy tales. The woman who'd discovered betrayal through Instagram. The woman who'd systematically dismantled a man's life. The woman who'd learned to love again. And now this woman, a mother. Someone responsible for teaching another human being what love actually looked like. I'm going to do better, she whispered to Thea. I'm going to show you what it means to be with someone who chooses you every single day. Constance asked to visit when the baby was 3 months old. Janine considered refusing, but Ezra reminded her that holding grudges hurt the grudge holder more than anyone else. Constance came for an afternoon, held her granddaughter with tears streaming down her face, and didn't ask for more than she was given. She's beautiful, Constance said softly. You're going to be an incredible mother. I'm going to be an honest mother. That's all I can promise. That's more than I ever managed, Constance said quietly. I spent so much time protecting my sons from consequences that I forgot to teach them how to be good men. You won't make that mistake. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was understanding. And understanding was enough for now. 2 years passed. Then 5. Janine's empire grew. She opened hotels in Paris and Barcelona and Amsterdam. The foundation helped tens of thousands of women. Her marriage deepened, weathered the normal conflicts and challenges, emerged stronger because both people chose it daily instead of taking it for granted. They had a son, Leo, who was quieter than Thea but equally stubborn. Flynn visited often, becoming Uncle Flynn to the children, finding joy in their family that his own family had never provided. He eventually met someone, a librarian named Amelia, who matched his gentleness. They married quietly, and Janine hosted the reception at her London hotel, grateful that one good thing had survived the Moore family disaster. Charlie remained in Oregon. From what she heard through Flynn, still sober, still working, still trying to be better. He'd written a book about financial recovery and accountability that actually got published. Flynn sent her a copy. She skimmed it once, noted that he didn't mention her by name, but clearly wrote about their marriage and put it away. His healing journey was his own. She sometimes thought about the Instagram post that changed everything, about how one photograph had detonated her entire life. She'd been so angry then, so focused on destruction and revenge. But standing in her London kitchen watching Ezra make breakfast while their children colored at the table, she felt something like gratitude for that moment. Not gratitude for the betrayal, but gratitude for the catalyst, for the forced reckoning that made her examine everything about her life and choose differently, for the destruction that created space for something better. One evening, tucking Thea into bed, her daughter asked about fairy tales, about whether they were real, whether love always worked out, whether happy endings existed. "Real love isn't a fairy tale," Janine said carefully. "It's not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone honest, someone who chooses you every day, someone who builds with you instead of taking from you." "Did you have to kiss a lot of frogs?" Thea asked, repeating something she'd heard in a story. "I married one frog, and then I found your father, who's definitely not a frog. Daddy's not a prince either," Thea said seriously. "He's better. He's real." Janine kissed her daughter's forehead and thought about how children understood things adults complicated. Ezra wasn't a prince. He was a man who showed up, who kept promises, who built beautiful things and loved fully and chose their family every single day. That was better than any fairy tale. That night, lying next to Ezra in the darkness, Janine thought about how revenge had seemed so important once. How she'd dedicated months to destroying Charlie, to making him pay, to ensuring he suffered. And yes, he'd lost everything. But that wasn't what mattered in the end. What mattered was that she'd rebuilt. She'd chosen healing over hatred. She'd opened her heart to someone who deserved it. She'd created a life so full and beautiful that her past became just that, past. Not forgotten, but no longer defining. "What are you thinking about?" Ezra murmured, half asleep. "How lucky I am. How scared I was that I'd never trust anyone again. How wrong I was." He pulled her closer. "I'm the lucky one. You chose me when you had every reason to choose yourself. I chose both. Choosing you didn't mean giving myself up. It meant becoming more myself." She thought about the woman she'd been in Milan, staring at that Instagram post, feeling her world shatter. If she could go back and tell that woman anything, what would she say? That you'll survive this. That you're stronger than you know. That the worst moment of your life will become the catalyst for the best years. That revenge will feel satisfying for a moment, but building something new will sustain you forever. That you'll learn to love again, deeper and truer than before. That you'll become a mother and teach your children what real love looks like. That you'll forgive some people and keep distance from others, and both choices will be right. That you'll look back on this moment and feel grateful, not for the betrayal, but for everything that came after. In the darkness of their bedroom, in the home they'd built together, Janine finally understood what the reckoning had really been about. Not punishing Charlie, not proving her strength, but reclaiming herself. Taking back the power she'd given away, the trust she'd misplaced, the years she'd spent performing for someone who never appreciated the performance. She'd built empires while other women built Pinterest boards. She'd survived betrayal that would have destroyed weaker people. She'd turned her pain into protection for others. She'd learned to love again after love had nearly killed her. She'd chosen joy over bitterness, growth over stagnation, possibility over safety. But more than any of that, she'd learned that the opposite of love wasn't hate. It was indifference. And Charlie Moore had become beautifully, completely irrelevant to her life. That was the real reckoning. Not what she'd done to Charlie, but what she'd done for herself. She'd taken a woman who'd been broken by betrayal and transformed her into someone who knew her worth, who chose love without fear, who built empires and families with equal passion. She'd become the woman she was always meant to be. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all. Not his destruction, but her absolute, undeniable, magnificent triumph.